You already know what time it is. Welcome back into the What Off-Season Sports podcast, everybody. Coming on the show, Major League Baseball has really fallen down the totem pole, in my opinion, with the way they have handled the pandemic, getting the season under control, everything that's happening right now. We're going to dive all the way into Major League Baseball's really status in the sports world right now. And then, of course, every year NFL teams make a turnaround to push for a better season, find out which teams are really primed for a turnaround this coming year. And Tua has been cleared for practice now, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time for him to compete with Fitzmagic for the QB1 spot. So much coming in the episode today, guys. Of course, never forget we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever your podcasts are at. Don't forget about the link tree and all of the bios of the social media. It'll take you to every sports piece we put out, every podcast we put out, everything What Off Season is in our social media bios, guys. Joining me on today's episode, I've got Jansen Harris, CEO of the Just Good Network, the sports guru himself. Jansen, amazing to finally bring you into the What Off Season podcast, man. Tell me what's going on today, brother.
Man, thank you for having me, man. I appreciate you bringing me on, and I'm excited. I'm just excited. It's a good time to talk sports. I know a lot is going on with the pandemic, and that could be depressing, but just got to be positive, man. So I'm happy to be on, and I'm happy to go at it with you, man. Let's do it. I'm excited.
Let's do it, bro. I love that too. Everybody's talking about, oh, there's not a whole lot to talk about with sports, but it's like, man, I feel like this is when you'll truly see, the originality and the creativity of everybody is what kind of content can you continue to put out with sports being so out of the normal this year. But we're about to have a great show. Major League Baseball has fallen down the totem pole, in my opinion. And there's just a few points that I want to hit here. But my main concern is how the Marlins' overall picture of baseball is affected. Before I get into my points here, Jansen, I want to ask you, just you being the sports guru that you are yourself and always putting out the sports content, really eating, breathing, and sleeping sports like the podcasters do. How do you feel about, the Marlins right now and how they're potentially going to affect this totally abnormal baseball season?
It's pretty embarrassing.
I agree.
It's embarrassing, man. That's all I could really say about this. The total number of players that have the coronavirus and the coaches have it. I just want to know, where's the social distancing? Right. I want to know, did they not see this coming? Now, if there was a couple players, I would say, okay, I'm a little bit concerned, but it's not a big deal. But Lord, man, the number of players who have the coronavirus, I'm not saying to make a joke of it or make light of it. Right. I'm just concerned about how is this happening and why are they not taking caution? Is it really just overall with sports? It's kind of, and I know we're sports guys, so we want to push for sports, but do people not realize how serious this could be? That right. People have lost their lives. The Marlins, MLB, period, they've handled it bad. But let's look at what Manfred has said. I just want people to know that he pushed for a bubble. He did push for a bubble. I know people are mad at him and have said he's messed things up. We want baseball back. That was a whole movement. But he did push for a bubble. People didn't listen to him. So I just wanted to point that out. Now we're kind of in panic mode, and we don't know what's coming next. And It's looking like they could shut things down. I'm seeing reports about potentially, if it's not handled in better ways, that the season could get shut down, which is pretty embarrassing, but it looks like it can happen, man, because you got to take the safe precaution measures. I know people don't want to hear that, but it's just the truth, man.
You got to be safe, man. With a pandemic that's affecting the world the way that it does, you have to take that leadership, and you just have to show everybody that, hey, this is how things have to be done. And that's why I've been so hard on Rob Manfred. And especially in a few episodes ago when I one of the topics was why I thought we wouldn't see baseball this year. And I said it 100% falls back on Rob Manfred and his lack of leadership. And I feel like that's another thing that's happening right now is just, he's not taking accountability for what's happening. I know, of course, reports have came out that he is ready, to cancel the season if people aren't acting correctly and taking the correct precautions with social distancing and the whole COVID-19 protocol. But I just think it's a big lack of leadership. But the big thing that really hits me with, the Marlins' overall effect on baseball itself is you got to look at the scheduling. will teams just miss games that have the Marlins on the schedule? Because as everybody's seen, it's up to Rob Manfred's discretion when the Marlins come back, how they're going to ease back into things. I don't know if there's been numbers or anything that have broken, said, okay, there has to be this many negative tests and this many days in between. I don't know the whole, what's the criteria for the Marlins coming back into the picture. But Jansen, when you first heard about the Marlins and them kind of being held off under Rob Manfred's discretion, how did it make you think about the schedule just overall with baseball when you first heard about it?
I think it's a mess because what about these makeup games if they even come back? I want to know how long they're going to quarantine. There's a lot we don't know about the situation. I do believe, and maybe it's this conspiracy thing, but whatever, I believe in it. If this was the Yankees we're talking about, season canceled. If this was the Dodgers, season canceled. But it's the Marlins and
their
people's
image
attitude
is too big for baseball.
Exactly. People think, who cares about the Marlins? They're not that good. Florida, this is where Corona basically is at its peak right now.
Yep.
But maybe that was a mistake. And I think Rob Manfred, to me, we go back to his bubble idea and the MLBPA pushing not to have it. I put it on them more than I put on the commissioner, but I know the commissioner's in charge. He's the face man. So I see what you're saying when it comes to things. But at the end of the day, I think the media also plays a defect. I'm hating on guys like us sometimes, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Look, they made it out to seem that they wanted him to be the villain. They wanted to look like the players weren't the villains in this one. But either way, it's a tough situation to be a commissioner in a situation like this. We probably shouldn't have sports, but at the end of the day, people care about profit so much. And what's ridiculous to me, and it's just kind of sick in a way, is that we might actually have high school sports and college sports. And it's like, to me, are you kidding me? I'm not trying to say it's a subject, but are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, really?
No, it's the lack of leadership that's almost like a domino effect through all of sports, I feel you.
It's embarrassing, man. I don't even know how college football really has the nerve to continue going.
Right. And then you even look like with the GHSA voting to only delay the high school football by 2 weeks? It was a unanimous vote, 12-0.
Exactly. It's crazy. It's crazy how you're not even we're just going to assume that young people are not going to die of this anymore. That's exactly what they're assuming.
Right. And it's like, you don't even want to think that heinously or that drastic, but unfortunately, like, that is the reality with COVID-19 being around everything, but especially in sports with, the contact, the sweat, the blood, the tears, everything that is exchanged. And, and like you were just saying, you alluded to a great point there. How in the hell are we going to manage football properly? And I mean, it's unfortunate too, because I was hearing on the radio, coming home from work, and they're talking about how there have been some COVID tests. I want to say it was more COVID tests popping up in baseball, but the people that tested positive per se, or whatever it may be, they originated from New Orleans. And you have the Saints down in New Orleans. So are we, obviously, knock on wood, I'm a big Who Dat Nation fan, but could we possibly be seeing the same instance with an NFL team? If there's too much COVID, the leadership just blows me away. And that's really the thing that sticks with me. But when you look past the scheduling, like I was just mentioning with the whole scenario of the Marlins coming back, and they're under Rob Manfred's decision, the MLB commissioner. And, is there a timeline for coming back? Nobody knows yet. Nobody knows specifically what's going to happen. Are we just short a team for the rest of the season? How do we make up for the teams that had the Marlins on their schedule for, X amount of games, with the Braves and the Phillies and the Nationals? I mean, then you got to factor in, okay, well, how do we make up those divisional games? Because, those divisional games at the end of the season, those factor in a lot. And,
exactly.
Football, but especially with baseball, when you have, it's still a lot of games with 60, but when you have 162, those divisional games matter. And then, but you can even go past the Marlins. How do you feel about the suspension of Joe Kelly?
Well, I think that was maybe overshadowed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's appropriate, man. Everybody needs to be held accountable for some of the things that they do. So I think it's appropriate that his suspension. But again, I think when we talk about the pandemic and stuff like that, that kind of shies away from fully putting your attention on some of these players and what they do. So I guess it's appropriate.
Get it. He did what he did. He threw over the heads, all this and that. But, my thing is the 8-game suspension I'm okay with because of how he threw at their heads. But when you factor in why he threw, and considering that the Astros didn't get any game suspension, any punishment handed down even to this date yet with game suspension for any player. It's just, I don't understand it. It's at that point, it's not a lack of leadership. It's just now it's a lack of accountability. And I just think Major League Baseball has really fallen short with handling the pandemic, starting the season, the lack of leadership with the commissioner, and then now you have the suspension going the way it is with Joe Kelly. Like I said, the actual decision itself isn't bad, but when it's prefaced with what's happened and why he threw, then it just makes you think, okay, well, where's the accountability for the Astros? Like you were just mentioning, people have to be held accountable. Where the hell is the accountability for the Astros for when they cheat?
True.
And
True.
it's not like, okay, don't take their World Series. That's fine. Whatever. People have had championships and titles where, there was some funny business going on, whatever. But get these guys off the field. Get these guys off of the diamond. They don't deserve to be there. And the fact that they just have the chance to go back this year and compete for another one, it's just what I don't agree with. But at the end of everything, I really do feel like Major League Baseball they've really knocked themselves down on the totem pole. And I hate to say that because I know how profitable of a business baseball is. And I just know the general population it can bring around it and all the hype that's around baseball. I love the World Series. I love October baseball, playoff baseball. But as much as the season's going to be here, I don't know if baseball sits right with me this year. How do you feel about that, Jansen?
You're 100% right, and you're telling the truth, man. That's the reality. This is what they do, man. I don't even think the Astros really should even qualify, I guess, for the playoffs this year or even have their World Series. Because when you openly cheat and then you just basically you're saying that cheating is okay.
Right.
But the NFL does that all the time. You saw with the Patriots. To even get caught cheating, your intentions were, okay, we don't feel like we're good enough. We're stepping outside of the normal competition to try to better our situation.
Also.
So it's crazy, man, that the suspensions, I guess, aren't even good enough. But to just talk about Joe Kelly's situation, people potentially could get hurt. So I thought the 8 games was appropriate. I know why he did it, but at the same time,
right.
A lot of kids look up to the sport, and if we're just talking about situation, he was wrong in that situation, even though we know why he was doing it.
Exactly.
But I just like to separate the situation. Astros should have got a stiffer penalty, but I don't know, man, what baseball is trying to do with that. To me, you send a message because now you're going to have teams that want to cheat. You're going to have teams that feel like, wow, something was taken from us. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I feel you. And like you were just saying, I feel like at the end of the day, it just comes down to lack of accountability. It's lack of integrity and just lack of respect for the game of baseball. We're going to go ahead now and spill over into, we always have those teams every year that make a 180, and we're going to be looking at the aspect of NFL teams that are primed for a turnaround season. And Jansen, I'm going to make you happy with this one. The number one team on my list, undoubtedly, I have not been sleeping on this team whatsoever. It's the Atlanta Falcons. I cannot take away from the fact that the Atlanta Falcons did just about everything they could this offseason. Let's just look at the fact that the Falcons were getting into the winning mentality in the second half of last season. If you look into the numbers, they had the best record the second half of the year, going 6-2, winning 6 of their last 8 games of the season. And the defense rallied into the top 10 in that stretch. I don't know if many Falcons fans know that, but the game where New Orleans came off the bye week and Atlanta beat them so badly, 27-9, that game beforehand, they had switched the defensive coordinators. They had moved their coaches around, and apparently everybody thought they moved them into the respectable positions. And it looks like they did, because they went from the bottom third of the league in defense to top 10. I want to say specifically they were top 7, but I'm going to leave it at top 10. And then you got to look at the signing of Todd Gurley, how this really impacts them in the red zone. If you take a look, the Falcons were 52% last year in red zone conversions. That's not very good for a quarterback in the talents of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, and receivers like Russell Gage and a great wide receiver too in Calvin Ridley. 52% in the red zone. That put them at 13th in the league in scoring. But signing Todd Gurley is some optimism in the backfield, because 11 of his 12 touchdowns last year came inside the 10-yard line. So if Todd Gurley can't provide you those, 10 to 15 to 17 carries, whatever the case may be for Todd Gurley this coming season, he can punch the ball into the red zone for you. And before I get spilling over into a little more of everything here, Jansen, I want to ask you, what was your favorite thing that the Falcons did this offseason to benefit the team?
My favorite thing the Falcons did was I'm glad they took a cornerback, first of all, in the first round of the draft. They desperately need a corner. And I don't know why a lot of teams in the NFL pretend like they don't need top corners or they don't need guys who could cover, because to me, it's such a game now in the NFL where the advantage is so tilted towards the offense. You need guys who could cover. You need guys who won't hold down the field, because that 5-yard penalty of defensive holding is automatic first down. So if it's like 30-19, little 5-yard up holding, it's automatic first down. The pass interference calls, you see that often with some of these cornerbacks not turning their head. So I like what they did with A.J. Terrell, bringing him in. Now, Dante Fowler Jr., it's 50-50 how people view him. I think the 25-year-old has things changed around. Some people say he's a product of Aaron Donald. I don't believe that personally. Do I believe he's going to be the top sack guy in the league? I don't know about all that. He's talking like it in the press conferences. He needs to at least get 11 to 12 sacks the way he was talking. And the way he produced with the Rams. So if he could do that.
An 11.5 sack season, I want to say.
Yeah, so he needs that production. He needs to keep that same energy for me to be satisfied. So that move was great. Now, Todd Gurley, he claims the knee's not an issue. He's 25 years old. He's been an all-pro. You know this, man. He's been a productive player. If Todd Gurley could be 85 to 90% of what he was with the Rams, and that's a big if, because I do believe there's some truth to that knee, then what you're going to see is a Falcons offense that could be as dominant as they were in 2016. I'm not sitting here saying the Falcons are the number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 team in the league. I am not saying that. They have a long way to go. We have to play these games to see how good they are. I'm not even saying they're going to win the division. I'm just saying the Falcons potentially could be a dangerous team. But I will say this, if Todd Gurley's on one, this could be one of the top offenses in the league. The defense needs to be decent this year. The defense could be decent. They'll be in the playoffs. Decent, 15th best, something like that. They need
the NFC South is too lethal on offense to have weak corners and a weak defense, man.
They need decent, but the only problem with them is they might need to. I know they added a guy, Denard, from Cincinnati, who's kind of was a bust, and let's see what he has. I'm not one of these guys who say, oh, well, maybe he could. We'll see. I don't think it's a great sign. They need another veteran cornerback. But if the Falcons can be decent on defense, create some turnovers, they don't have to be great, and the offense does what most people think they can do, and Matt Ryan's as good as what he's talking about in the offseason. Somebody's the best quarterback in the NFC South, which I don't agree with, but we'll see. Potentially he could play the best this year. Then watch out for the Falcons. But they could potentially make some noise.
Of course. They could be a top 10 team in the league. I fully agree. If the defense steps up, because the offense has been there. The offense has been there, taking a step back from Devontae to Todd Gurley, yes, but there's more potential there in Todd Gurley. We've seen the type of runner Todd Gurley has been, rookie of the year, arguably the best running back in the league for a minute there, between him and Zeke Elliott. But yeah, I feel you, man. The Falcons have a lot of potential. And like you were saying, it was a great investment in Dante Fowler coming off career highs in sacks and tackles for loss. And you even look, Atlanta's pass rush last year was awful. They were almost dead last in the league. Going back to that New Orleans game where they beat them 27-9, Atlanta came into that game with 6 sacks. They sacked Drew Brees for 6 times in that game alone. They met their season sack total in that one game against Drew Brees. Now, given that was the game that Andrews Pete broke his arm and the offensive line went down a little bit, but I'm not going to take anything away from Atlanta. They capitalized on that, and they turned around the pass rush. They turned around a lot, ironically, in that game against the Saints. Comes to show, Atlanta got hot last year at the end of the season, something they have really failed to do at all in the past 3 seasons. Getting hot, winning 6 of your last 8, just winning 6 of 8 games. That hasn't been something Atlanta has been able to do, and anything Atlanta has done since the Super Bowl year. Say what you want about Julio and Calvin Ridley, but they're one of the best wide receiver tandems in the league right now. I think Calvin Ridley is primed for a breakout year. He's already been consistent. He's already been a good wide receiver 2 behind Julio Jones. Overall, I feel good that Atlanta can turn it around this season, but the number 2 team I have making a turnaround here in the next NFL season, I've got the Indianapolis Colts, and they had a damn good draft. They had a brand new trio they brought in from the NFL draft. And you got to look, Michael Pittman was one of the best receivers in the draft, Michael Pittman Jr. He's actually already got his keys to his house in Indianapolis, so he's set. He is ready for the NFL season. So there's an upgrade at wide receiver, a good wide receiver 2 behind T.Y. Hilton. And then you got to look at the gunslinger Jacob Eason out of Washington, of course, that everybody saw transition over from Georgia. He is a good quarterback, definitely was able to make his way when he went to Washington. And then also you got to look, I'm going to say right now, Jonathan Taylor was the best running back in the draft. I respect J.K. Dobbins, but Jonathan Taylor was the best running back in the NFL draft this year. So they drafted one of the best running backs in the draft. He was a top 10 quarterback in the draft in Jacob Eason. And then you got to look at Michael Pittman Jr. also. And there's just more firepower in the backfield at the end of the day. But I want to ask you, Jansen, do you think the Colts can really turn it around this year? Do you think that they could be primed to turn around and win 10, 11 games this year with the draft class they just brought in?
Absolutely. They could win the division. I know everybody's high on Tennessee, but to me, man, I got to see what Derrick Henry does this season.
He's got to keep that momentum up. Yes.
I do believe Derrick Henry is a Pro Bowl running back. I'm not going to crap on him. I'm a big supporter of running backs doing their thing, getting their money. I'm glad he got his money. Probably should have got more money. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I think Ryan Tannehill's that good. Right. I don't think Ryan Tannehill's that good. He did what he had to do last season. He got paid, but I don't think Ryan Tannehill's that good. Now let's look at Houston real quick. Houston, to me, digress. Mm-hmm. You do not trade D-Hop unless he didn't want to be there. So I'm assuming he didn't want to be there, didn't get along with the coaching staff there, O'Brien. So I think there was something there that people weren't talking about. Now, the Colts adding Phillip Rivers, a veteran quarterback, a guy who's got the job done before. I wouldn't consider him a winner. That's my favorite quarterback, but he's put up a lot of numbers, similar to like Matt Ryan type of guy. Right. So with him as a veteran quarterback, I think that's the missing piece. Some people thought that they didn't need to upgrade the position. I thought they did. So I think he has the juice, man. I think he has the juice, and he's going to bring that leadership where they can compete for a division title. The defense is good enough where they could stay in games. I just have to see how much juice Phillip Rivers has, but I think that he could put up some good numbers getting the ball to Hilton, getting the ball, Marlon Mack in the backfield.
Jacob Eason.
So Jacob, I don't know, man. I think Phillip Rivers still has a little bit of juice. He's there to start with the Colts. It's a winnable division for them because I'm not too sold on the Titans, even though the defense is really good. Did a great job against Lamar Jackson. Did a great job the second half of the season. But they're not a lot to me like a 12-win team. They could easily win 9 games or 10 games, but they're not a complete dominant team. In Houston, I would have had favored to win the division. Getting rid of Hopkins, I want to see what their plan is. I know Will Fuller is a really good receiver. I know they got other options. I know Deshaun Watson, he's primed to have a huge year. He's primed to get his contract extended, from what I'm hearing. But they're not a lock to be a top contender in the AFC, in my opinion. So I'm not mad at you for putting the Colts on a list for a turnaround. I could definitely see it. They have enough on the quarterback play. They have enough at running back, and they have enough at receiver. And the defense, to me, has enough as well, too. So at worst, this is an average football team that coming into next season. At worst, if we don't get much production from Rivers. But at best, I could see them winning 11 games. So I agree with you with that.
The next team I have here, stemming from last season, this roster was arguably top 5 in the league. They could hang with the likes of, the Saints and the Ravens when it just came to raw talent on the team. And it's got to be the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys had so much talent last year and just weren't able to do much with it. And I 100% blame that on Jason Garrett. I'm happy that Jason Garrett's finally out of there. He was really almost like a poison in that locker room. Maybe not necessarily to the players, but I know every fan was ready for Jason Garrett to go. And there were players in there that were ready for Jason Garrett to go as well. They had respect for him. But at the end of the day, when you have that much talent and you're not able to produce with it, it's going to piss you off as an owner, as a coach, as a player, and especially as a fan. So I had to put the Dallas Cowboys on this list. And a big reason I did is because you have to look at the new head coach and Mike McCarthy. He's going to get the offense back right. He's going to get the ball moving. He's going to be able to feed Zeke. And the only caveat with signing Mike McCarthy is he was 29th in the league the last year that he actually coached in rush attempts. So he's not a huge fan of running the ball, but on the flip side, he's also never had a running back like Ezekiel Elliott. And he'll have a great quarterback in Dak Prescott. So I'm not necessarily sure what the holdup could be, but I'm very confident that the Cowboys will have a turnaround season. And you can't take away from the fact that they signed CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb he was arguably the best wide receiver in the draft, and he's going to be a very good force there. You're going to have Amari Cooper, you're going to have Michael Gallup, and now you're going to have CeeDee Lamb. So you can't deny the production he's going to bring to the field. And say what you want about Mike McCarthy, but he won a bunch of games in Green Bay, and he's a Super Bowl champion. I know he hasn't been to the Super Bowl since the 2010-11 season, the year after New Orleans went, but Mike McCarthy still had plenty of double-digit wins. He still had the NFC Championship appearances, and he was able to get to the big game and win it. And it was a good offseason for Dallas all around. Do you feel like Dallas could turn it around next year, though, Jansen?
Absolutely. CeeDee Lamb, you spoke on it, Adam. Thank you for mentioning that. I think he could have a huge season with Dallas year one. Dak Prescott.
He could have 800 yards receiving as a rookie, possibly, man.
Exactly. And you have a guy like Dak Prescott who was second in the league in passing yards last year. Dak Prescott's just getting better. He has a lot to prove coming into this year. I think he was disrespected by that contract not being extended. And you've seen, I've been talking about this all off season. $31.4 million, that ain't no scrub money right there. I'm just saying out of respect, should got a long-term deal. So expect him to ball out. Ezekiel Elliott, he's upset about, I believe, his Madden rating and how everybody's thinking he's not one of the top backs. So expect Zeke to have a really good season as well, too. And Mike McCarthy, I think he's the right coach. He's a veteran coach who players can respect. Right. He's a Super Bowl champion. So the resume, it speaks for itself. They needed that championship experience with Dallas because Jason Garrett wasn't getting the job done for a long time. What helped him was he was a Jerry Jones guy, which, hey, it's good to network good sometimes in the world, and that's what Jason Garrett's good at doing, is networking and staying on Jerry Jones's good side. And it's crazy how it got that bad where Jerry probably didn't even want to fire him, but he had no choice. So I think the Cowboys will make the playoffs this season. There's no doubt in my mind the Cowboys will be a playoff team. And I will even say this, man. I wouldn't be surprised if Dak Prescott is an MVP candidate. I really think he's primed for a huge season. Honestly. He has the weapons around him. He has enough at the running game with Zeke. Zeke's proven. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dak Prescott has that big of a year for the Cowboys. So I agree with you with the Cowboys, Stan. They have the defense that could play with anybody. I'm not a huge fan of the Eagles. I'm not a huge fan of what the Giants are going to produce next season, and obviously not the Redskins. So the Cowboys are going to win that division.
Correction, Jansen, the Washington football team.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm just messing with you. No, you're good, bro. Number 5 team on the list for NFL teams prime for a turnaround season. I do have the Washington football team on this list, and I have quite a few bullet points here, and I'm ready to go down the list and really solidify why I think Washington could turn it around next year. I'm not saying playoffs. I'm not saying anything extravagant, but maybe could win 7 to 9 games next year, but let's take a look. So a very good new head coach hire in Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera is one of the best defensive coaches in the league. And you really got to look with this specifically right here. Washington football team is a mess and they are troubled. And Ron Rivera is great with these situations because if you look back in 2011 when he took over the Carolina Panthers, the Panthers were 2-14. He takes over the Carolina Panthers in that year. He made them a top 10 defense consistently every year, took them to a Super Bowl while harvesting an MVP in Cam Newton. So you can't deny that Ron Rivera doesn't know how to get the job done. You can't deny that he is unable to, or you can't say that he doesn't recognize talent. You can't say that he doesn't make things work because if you look at that Carolina team, he really turned Carolina around since 2011. And of course they fell off, towards the end of last year. The locker room completely bailed on him. They fired Ron Rivera, the whole 9 yards. But I do think the Washington football team just by bringing in Ron Rivera, even if they didn't draft Chase Young, even if they didn't have the good wide receiver draft, even if they didn't have, Dwayne Haskins, which I'm not that high on anyways. But, just bringing in a presence in Ron Rivera and seeing what he's been able to do. And he brings that confidence to the table. He brings that swagger to the table. You never really hear a whole lot from Ron Rivera, but he's over there on the sidelines with the slick black hair and the glasses and, the arms crossed. I mean, he's got the swagger of the coach, and I think he's got the coaching culture specifically at the end of the day for the Redskins. But before we get into the draft, what do you think specifically with the hiring of Ron Rivera? How do you think that impacted the Washington football team, Jansen?
It made Washington better. It's an upgrade from what they were accustomed to. Ron Rivera is a proven winner. Ron Rivera is a tough guy. He can build defenses. And
yes, he can.
With him adding Chase Young, I think it's years away.
They still have a lot of problems protecting Dwayne Haskins. They still have a lot of problems throwing the football. They have a lot of problems getting consistent running game from Washington, from what we're getting from Washington. So I don't see it. I don't think the Redskins will improve that much. Could they win 6 games? Potentially find a way to do that, but I'm not really high on the Redskins. Dwayne Haskins, I have to see some consistency. Year 1, Ron Rivera, I don't think will be as good as maybe year 2 or 3 down the road. They
Right.
still have to build this team. They still have to build around Chase Young. Defensively, they still have to build around Dwayne Haskins. But some people like their draft, so we'll see, man. But to me, from my perspective, I don't see much out of the Washington football team.
I feel that. I feel that. And what's actually crazy enough is the reason that made me kind of want to lean towards this a little bit is that I think they had a beautiful draft. If you look back into it, I wouldn't say a beautiful draft, but I think they had a good draft for their situation. Obviously, the best player in the draft in Chase Young, he's going to be a top 5 pass rusher automatically, I think, coming into the league. He could break the rookie sack record. I'm not going to say top 5 pass rusher. That is a little bit of a stretch, but I do think he could be top 10. I think he will be a force coming into the NFL early on. Definitely defensive rookie of the year. I think 100% Chase Young is winning the defensive rookie of the year this coming season. And you got to look at the wide receiver core, how they improved with a huge steal in the draft. Some people say Antonio Gandy-Golden out of Liberty was maybe the biggest steal of the draft for the round he was taken in and the value he brings to the table, because you can't deny it. Look at his numbers. He was a 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown. That's right. 1K double-digit touchdown receiver in all 3 of his seasons at Liberty. So he's a force coming in as a rookie already. Of course, you got Terry McLaurin, who is a top 5 receiver when it comes to second and third year receivers in the league. And then you got to look at Antonio Gibson coming out with a 4.39 40 time. So that raw speed on the field, especially in the wide receiver core. Don't be surprised if you see a little wildcat, maybe some jet sweeps here and there. But at the end of the day, I do think that the Washington football team had a good draft. The head coaching hire in Ron Rivera combined with the decent draft that they had. I can't take away the fact that they could have, like I said, it's not going to be a push for the playoffs, or it's not going to be a 10-win season. But I mean, if they do win 7 to 8 games, I could see it happening.